Question number 5. Classify a relationship as linear, exponential, or quadratic, okay? When you're doing this, guys, what's the first thing we're going to do is try to classify if it's exponential first, and then we're going to classify if it's linear or then quadratic, all right? So let's try to do the first question. So to test if it's exponential, guys, we need to look at the f of x or the y value, okay? So another name for f of x, okay, is y, okay? So again, another name for f of x is y, all right? So we need to look at the y values, all right? So to do exponential, so again, to do exponential, all right, you try to divide the numbers, okay? So you try to do this number divided by the number that came before. So 4 divided by 12. Then you're going to try to, so calculate that. So if you divide 4 by 12, you get a decimal number. So let's plug in a calculator to figure it out, okay? So 4 divided by 12 will be 0.33 or 1/3, okay? So again, I would write 0.33, okay? So now you're gonna do, what you're gonna do next is try to divide the other set of numbers. You're gonna divide -4 by the number that came before it, okay? So I would do -4 divided by 4, okay? So -4 divided by 4, you don't really need a calculator for that because you know it's -1, all right? Because these numbers were not the same, that means it is not exponential. So again, when to figure out if it's exponential, you would divide the numbers. Because when we divided this by this, and then this by this, we did not get the same numbers every time. That means it is not exponential. All right. Now we're going to test if it's linear. Okay. So now we're going to test linear. All right. So to test if it's linear, guys, what you're going to do is that you're going to look at the change in the x values and then the change in the y values. So I saw that my x values went from -2 to -1, -1 to 0, and then all the way to +2. So they were getting more and more positive. You are adding every single time, all right? So every time you were adding 1. So every single time you were adding 1, okay? But when I look at my y values, they were also changing. These were actually decreasing because they were getting more and more negative, all right? So because they were decreasing, that means we were subtracting, all right? But how much were we subtracting by? So here you can figure it out that 12 was being subtracted by 8, okay, to get that 4. But a lot of times that's not easy for persons to calculate, okay? So what you can do is that you can open your calculator and then just put it in your calculator. So you would put the number that came before it, so 4 minus the number that came previous, so minus 12. You get -8. So again, that's how we got this negative right here. But we did 4 minus 12. Then you would do -4 minus 4. So I know that that's -8. You can put it in your calculator if you would like, okay? So again, if I did -4 minus 4, I get -8, all right? So now we're going to go, because we realized that those numbers were the same every time around, all right? If we had subtracted these two, we would also get -8. We'd have subtracted these two, all right? We'd have also gotten -8, okay? So again, because those numbers were the same every time, they were constant, all right? That means that it is linear, all right? So again, that means it is indeed linear. And it's linear because the first time when we looked at the difference, they were constant. So again, it's linear because the first difference are constant. So here you would select because the first difference are constant, all right? So now let's try to do the next one, all right? So firstly, we're going to test if it's exponential. So always test if it's exponential first, all right? So to test if it's exponential, we're going to have to divide the numbers. So we do this number divided by the number that came before. So 23 divided by 9, all right? If I put that in my calculator, so again, I'll put that in my calculator. 23 divided by 9, I got 2.55. So 2.55, okay? Then I will put 65 divided by 23. So then I'll put 65 divided by 23. When I put that in my calculator, so again, if I put that in my calculator, 65 divided by 23, did I get the same decimal every time? No, all right. Here I got 2.82. Again, here I got 2.82, all right. Because I did not get the same number for this, all right, I know that this is not exponential. So this is not exponential, all right. So exponential is out. Now we're going to test if it's linear. So to test if it's linear, we need to look at the difference in the numbers, all right? So here they were changing by 1 every time, all right, because they were all increasing by 1. If I add 1 to these numbers, I get the number that comes after, all right? 1 plus 4 is 5. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3, and so forth, okay? Now we're going to look at the change in my f of x or my y values, okay? Here went from 9 to 23. So it was increasing because it was getting more positive. All right. I know that this was increasing by 14. Okay. If you don't know what it's increasing by just looking at it. So again, if you did not know that it was increasing by 14, you could put in your calculator. So you would put 23 minus the number that came before, which is 14. And then you would put 65 minus the number that came before, which is 23. We got 42, all right? So again, when we did the next difference of these numbers, I got positive 42, all right? Were those numbers the same? No. So because they were not the same, we know it is not linear. So it's not linear, all right? So we're not going to assume that it's quadratic as yet, all right? I'm going to just do check to make sure that it is quadratic or not, okay? So again, the next difference of these numbers, so if I did 135 minus 65, this would have a difference of 70, all right? And again, we saw that they were not the same. Do it up until like about 3 times, okay? Now we're going to test if it's quadratic. So to test if it's quadratic, I need to look at the difference between these numbers right here, okay? So the difference between 14 and 42 is 28, all right? So that's the difference between 14 and 42. So again, the difference between those numbers was 28, okay? The difference between these numbers were also 28, all right? If you did not know that by just looking at it, you could put in your calculator. You would put in 42 minus 14, okay? We got 28, and then you would put 70 minus 42. And we got that same number, all right? So again, that's where the difference between these numbers right here. Because the second time that we did the difference, they were the same number, we know that it is quadratic, all right? And it's quadratic because the second time when I looked at the differences, all right, those second difference were 28, they were the same number, all right? So it's correct because the second difference is constant, all right? So now let's try to do the next one, all right? So always test if it's exponential first. So again, always test if it's exponential first, okay? By dividing the numbers, all right? Because it's the easiest one to test for. So you would divide 56 by the number that came before, and then you would divide 112 by the number that came before it, which is 56, okay? If you actually put that in your calculator, you might not need it, but if you put 56 divided by 28 in your calculator, you will get 2, all right? And then if you did 112 divided by 56, you also got 2. And if you did 224 divided by 112, you got 2. And if you did 448 divided by 224, we also got 2. So because every time when I divided the numbers, all right, I got the same 2 every time, we know that it is exponential, all right? So it is, all right? So again, the answer for this would be exponential. And the reason it's exponential because the ratios, when I divided those numbers, or the ratio of successive y values are constant. All right. So again, this is the correct response. All right. If you do exponential, linear, and quadratic, and none of them works, that's the only time you click none of the above. All right. So again, just like that.